And Chris Rockley back here December 3rd, 2018, talking with Sean O'Connor, the St. Louis County native, and well, I shouldn't say native. They correct myself. The Chicago native who moved to Kentucky and then eventually made it here in middle school and ran at Marquette and then went to Mizzou for an education degree and then got into coaching in Pattonville and then next stop Lafayette, and it's turned the Lafayette Lancers into a superpower. Tell me, you've written this book and published a book last summer, Distance Training Simplified. You obviously had some great mentors over the year ran with legendary Jim Carey and Tim Carey and current Marquette coach Mike Ebert when you were at Marquette, running at Marquette High School, finished school and went to Pattonville and with Coach Kern and Coach Bingham there and then even on the end of the influences at Lafayette. Tell me, after all the success, when did the idea of writing a book pop in your mind? Obviously, good friend Ryan Banda has just finished, 5 years of work on one last year, and when obviously all your success, you had coaches and people picking your brain and saying, okay, what's the secret to Coach O'Connor and the Lafayette boys' success? And I'm sure people start picking your brain, and is that where the initial jumping off point of, hey, let's put this down in writing and let's put this out there?
Yeah, I definitely had a lot of people asking, especially when we travel to Rimrock or we go to Chili Pepper and so these places, some of these schools and the teams there. Like the one coach from Arkansas, he's like, we didn't even know who you were. And you guys didn't even go to the award ceremony. I'm like, yeah, we had prom that night, so we had to roll out real fast.
Yeah.
The dudes were really concerned about that.
Yeah.
And so
we got a homecoming dance to get to, right?
Yeah, and so just people emailing me questions, and so I saved a lot of these questions that people are asking, and after a while, you're just like, man, I have a lot of stuff here, and
right.
You sort through all these questions and all this things, and you're like, a lot of these people are asking the same question, just worded differently. And
sure.
There might be a need for something like this, and then it kind of grew from there. Some other people are asking me you should write some of this stuff down, and you should write a book. And I was like, I'm a math person. I don't write. Writing is not good for me. It's very poor, as you can tell by my grammar, and so then from there it's just more and more I thought about it, and you're just like when you see all these books that you read, like Jack Daniels or V. Hill,
right.
or even Steve Magnus or anything like that, and beyond that, they're all written by people who have physiology degrees, people who
exercise science, right?
Yeah, and people who primarily coach collegiate or pros.
Right.
Like Scott Christensen might be the only exception. And I don't know if he's actually wrote a book. He does a lot with the USATF Level 2 school.
Stillwater, Minnesota,
yeah.
Clinic. He speaks all over the country.
He speaks all the time, And he might be the only one who's primarily a high school guy. Magnus I know has taught or has coached some high school, sure. But he never taught.
Right.
And so I the more I thought about it, it's there might be a need for something for people who are teaching in the high school who don't have time to go get physiology or exercise science degrees. When you read this stuff and you're just you're swimming in all this special endurance 2 and VVO2 max and
right.
all this that, and there's got to be a simpler way that we can explain this to not just coaches but also the kids, kind of
sure.
like what you do teaching in the classroom every day.
Right. And when did you start running as a kid? How old were you when that started? Was that not till freshman at Marquette, or?
Well, no, I never really trained until I was a freshman at Marquette.
Okay.
I remember when I was a kid, I always did really well in those presidential awards, something.
Physical fitness, yeah.
I always did really well in that because I could run the mile really fast compared to a lot of the kids my age. And I never really ran the mile much in middle school because I went to Holy Infant instead of going to Selvage
sure.
and Marquette. And so our mile was run in a L-shaped parking lot. It was 16 and a half laps.
Right.
And I don't even know if it was right.
Yeah.
But I remember running that and finishing, I think, second out of all the kids in the school. And so, I was good at it. And
sure.
And I think going into high school, especially when I went to Marquette and I didn't know a whole bunch of people, I was just desperately trying to find something I was good at that I could fit into.
Sure.
And so that's kind of got me into into that realm.
And then at what point did the thought enter your mind, hey, I might want to coach someday. I might want to teach and coach.
Oh, I mean, I think probably by the time I was a junior or senior, I mean, you can ask any of my old coaches. I was an interesting high school child.
Yeah.
I was a little off. And so, whether it's, Niehaus or the Carries or Ebert, I was kind of an odd kid, and I just thought that it was cool, and I wanted to kind of get into coaching because like they provided me with this atmosphere and this environment where I felt like I belonged, and I didn't feel like I belonged in other places.
Sure.
And so, I was like, okay, like to honor some of that, maybe that's kind of what I should do. Like I want to provide that place for kids just like me.
Yeah.
Who otherwise would feel lost. And so I was like, well, it's pretty admirable, I guess. We'll try that. We'll see how this goes.
Right. And so was that the plan going off to college, going off to Mizzou, was to get an education degree and teach and coach? Yeah,
I was going to teach math, and I guess I picked math. I like computers, and when going to Marquette, all that stuff was kind of wrapped in the math department. Like they taught all the programming classes, so I figured I would just go that route. And I was always good at math, and so I was like, I'll just survive this. And eventually I worked my way into teaching primarily computers, and I enjoy it.
And then when you start writing things down and decide, okay, I'm going to write a book, tell me about the process, how long it was, and what it was like, and just about that.
It took me about a year. And I started out kind of outlining it, and just like, okay, here's an outline of what I want to do or say. And part of the problem I had initially writing it, I was like, I don't know how long this thing's going to be. It might be like 10 pages. Like I'm trying to make this stuff as simple as possible. 10 pages isn't a really good book. That's like a little pamphlet, like a handout. Like that's. So I started writing an outline. I'm like, well, let's see how much what I can write about, and let's and that fits in, and see how that goes. And the outline got to be like 6 pages long. I was like, okay, there might actually be a little bit of a book here, and so just been really fortunate to have some great people help me, and just knowing great people to lean on. Like I contacted Greg Hall. I was like, Greg, you're an amazing writer. Can you help me? Like, proofread this thing. My writing is trash.
Great ambassador for our sport over in Kansas City.
Oh, yeah.
Great writer and reporter and former Kansas City Star columnist.
Yeah, and so with him, I was like, he's a big, avid running enthusiast, but he's not a coach. And so I'm like, okay, if he understands this.
And he's from a running background.
Yeah, he's from a running background.
Long-time runner, distance runner.
Oh, yeah. But he would be the perfect person who maybe to represent a new coach who maybe has run in the past, but it's his first time trying to organize training for a group of high school kids. And if he can make sense of it, that's good. And he can fix my grammar. And he was the one that got me to put the stories in and add some pictures, because I would have been boring. So he definitely deserves a lot of credit in that route. And then Coach Kern helped me edit it. He was a longtime yearbook teacher and newspaper, and he worked in some newspaper for the newspaper in the past, and has done a lot of that stuff. And he's a Mizzou grad too, and so he had a lot of experience publishing stuff. And so and he'd actually written his own book as well. And so I was like, okay, can you help me edit this? Give me just basics, like what font is appropriate for a book. I don't know. And so and he was awesome. He would edit 10 pages and then mail them to me. And just kept doing that. And that was really cool. And then I had Steve Stallis and Drew LaFleurs. They both helped younger coaches. I reached out to them to see if they would kind of read through and get opinions and make sure that it made sense to them. Because I talked to them a bunch, so they kind of knew what I was trying to do. And when you're trying to explain something you already do, at least in my instance, I leave gaps sometimes, because I don't know, I'm just trying to type this stuff out or write this stuff down, and I know about this little component because I've done it forever, and so I don't think to explain it. And so it was nice to have them kind of go through and be like, hey, you may want to elaborate on this.
Exactly.
Thanks. That saved me on that one. And then I used to Banta just written his book, so he was really helpful, and just going through the publishing process, because he had vetted a lot of different publishing options for self-publishing, and so, and and for going non-self-publishing, like going through an actual, some of the actual publishers.
Right.
And so a lot of that was real beneficial, and he's always on me about, like, you can't give everything away for free.
Right. Oh, exactly. No.
And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
and he's not, because he's been super helpful. So
Sure.
Yeah, just put it all together using their help.
And you kind of talk about training plan, and honestly, it's funny. I'm not sure there's any other thing in the world that's got more theories than distance training. I mean, if you're talking coaching, what other sport or whatever, what other industry are there more theories and ways to think about way to do it successfully? So, over the modern era of distance running, the last 100+ years, couple hundred years, or 100 years or so. I mean, they span the globe. They all over the place, and I think to break it down like you do and lay out some training plans, but also give some example stories and that thing, I think people will really enjoy it. And tell me else about the audience, not just newcomers to the sport, but what are other people going to enjoy and learn from this book?
I mean, hopefully, and this was one thing Greg really helped me a lot with, was trying not to just write it to a niche group.
Right.
In my mind, I'm like, this is going to be like an aid to coaches. Like, I want to make it towards, like, mostly geared towards newer coaches who are, like, who are also teachers, and they're teaching 3 preps, and they're doing all these other things, and their background may not be in distance running, but here are some real simple concepts that they could apply to have solid fundamental training. And he was real big, on expanding that, like adding in the stories and pictures, and he's like, anybody could, to read it, like high school athletes or just any sort of athlete, someone who's trying to coach themselves or just wants to understand kind of the basic premise of what and how running works. And and I said, people who just like the sport would enjoy reading the stories.
Sure,
There's a story every chapter about something that some goofball I coached did, and, and most of the time it's, with the stories, I was trying to make it to where reflect more on me, like what I should have done differently to prevent this from happening. And sometimes there's just nothing I could do.
Right.
Like when kids put a bumper sticker on my car because they think it's funny, and I want to like destroy them.
Well, and I'm not sure there's, we talked about the different theories of this, but I'm not sure there's any other sport where there's more variables to success and disappointment than in distance running. I mean, it's from equipment to where you're competing to just one simple thought that negative thought pops in the mind, or distraction, and I mean it can change the whole outcome.
Oh yeah, it's an interesting. That's what makes it fun though, because if it was like, all I literally do is just plug in this number here, this number there, and this kid's going to do that, like that would just be that'd be boring. Like after a couple of years of that, you'd be like, okay, like, let's do something else. So it keeps, especially the high school kids, they keep you on your toes.
Right.
Like they'll never cease to surprise you. They're interesting children.
Well, and we can't just say, okay, you're a successful coach and you got this good book out, but you're obviously successful on yourself. How far from the world? How many of the world marathons have you completed now? And you're obviously marathon PR 249 at Boston a couple years ago. But how many of the world have you got down?
3.
And okay. And
that I don't know what this. Stallis wrote me into this one. I don't know. I'm getting old for this. This kids thing.
Right.
I mean, for anyone who's watching this, if you got little kids, they're exhausting.
A 6 month, now that you've got a 6 month old and now two young ones in the house, but also talk about your profession. You're not just a successful coach, but you're professed running nerd. So a lot of your free time is spent, researching and reading and intaking all this information. So talk about some of that's come through the book and what you've learned, because you love the bits and pieces and the little facts and the detail of the sport.
So one of the things I picked up on just from, like you said, reading a bunch of things, going to level 2 school, going to clinics, is that there's actually a lot of similar concepts in training, and like if you look at like all the main stuff. So again, you're looking at like whether it be V Hill or Daniels or Christensen or Magnus, like there are common themes throughout all those books, and that's what I was trying to kind of explain, hopefully, well in the book, is that like.
People can buy it on Amazon and decide for themselves how well you've explained it, and
these and they all use different terminology. Like Magnus will use a lot of like terminology more based towards race distances, which is what I tend to do as well.
Right.
Christensen is more from an exercise science type background, and so he uses your speed endurance 1, speed endurance 2, VO2 max, those types of terms. And then, Daniels uses his own terms where he has like a T pace, an I pace, an E pace, an R pace. But really, just from reading all this stuff, what I started to recognize is that all training is basically a bunch of stuff that is very specific and then stuff that is very fundamental. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter what you call it. And if you look, they're even like Horwell and Co., and which is a lot kind of where Christensen has taken and expanded upon into his own thing. Like Horwell had his 5-pace training system. Christensen I think uses like 7. He includes some more pure speed stuff. But all those all those paces are very specific to the race that you're training for. And I started to notice that. And then even with V Hill does a lot of for a lot of that stuff he does his mile repeats is what he's most known for. But they're at, if you do some conversions, they're at like 10K pace, and these guys are racing 10K. Mm-hmm. And so they're doing a lot of like really specific work. He just called it VO2 max or VVO2. And so fundamentally, what you're doing is you basically, and how I try to explain in the book, is like if I'm training for this race, I want to train at paces that are around that, either faster or slower. And then, to all endurance running, you have the fundamental stuff, whether it's like hill sprints, striders, long runs, easy runs, like that's the other big chunk. And so just trying to piece all of that together into a cohesive training plan.
Sure.
That a kid can see the progression and understand what we're doing. Because I know I state this in the book. Like I remember having conversations with some of my athletes, like, oh, we're doing this this VO2 max workout, and they're like, well, what's that? I'm like, well, it's an aerobic thing. You're trying to build up your heart and increase stroke volume and all that. And I'm like, they're like, what the?
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I got to do better than this. Like this, like they'll say okay because they trust me and they're just gonna go with it. But
right.
Like, it's not really explaining what you're doing. But if you're like, hey, it's basically like 2 mile pace. Have you ever run the 2 mile? And they're like, yeah, I hate it. Ran it last year.
Right.
I get it. Well, that's what we're trying to do.
Sure.
We're trying to train towards 5K pace. And so it's like one of the little stepping stones along the way. And they're like, oh, that makes sense why we're doing this.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, maybe I should explain stuff like that.
Yeah, right. No, because even new younger coaches who are like, what are all those terms and that he's throwing out there, I think they'll find that you, again, the title of the book, Distance Training Simplified, that you explain those things and kind of break them down and make them a lot easier. Obviously, as coaches, there's some fundamentals of what your responsibilities are, and then as you go on from that, it's trying to know as much as you can, to a certain extent, with still living a successful life and getting enough sleep and taking care of your family and friends and kids or whatever, but to gain, increase your knowledge to help your athletes. But tell me the other side of that. Whereas I don't know if you've, correct me if I've finished your master's in sports psychology, and tell me now that you've finished that a while back, where have you found the balance? How much of it is physical and how much is it psychological and mental, and is it different for every kid? Tell me what you've learned and the balances, and now that you've 13-year coaching career or so, tell me.
That's a good question. It's interesting. There is a little variation. Like I'm a real big believer in that there is no like set in stone rule, because we're people. We're billions of cells that are like different. Yeah. Like there's there's so much variety and variability that you can't just say, well, this always has to be like this. 'Cause I just don't believe that fundamentally. I think there's good like you said, there's good balance. Like I think we need to balance out life, and we need to balance out training versus psychology. And I think I would say, like, with a lot of the sports psychology stuff, and this I don't get into with the book a whole lot. Man, there's a lot of stuff.
Right, yeah, no, it was a loaded question. I just threw at you like they're like a bomb, a grenade.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of good stuff in that. I think the big takeaways, and just from reading, whether it's from that degree, you know, I'm reading 7 Healthy Habits right now, you know, for highly effective people.
Right.
And you know, I read a lot. I read another great leadership book about, you know, 4 presidents by, you know, and kind of how their different leadership styles were in crisis, both the Roosevelts and Abraham Lincoln and Lyndon B. Johnson. And a lot of this stuff just seems to come down to, like, focusing, basically to making the choice that I'm going to control what I control. The stuff that I can't control, forget about it. And I'm just going to do what I can, you know, to focus on what makes me the best person I can be, because the best person of me, the best version of me is going to run the best.
Yeah.
And so just being the most mentally, physically, emotionally healthy person I can be. And then also, you know, focusing on, like, the people around you and making them the best people they can be.
Right.
And ignoring all the other stuff that you don't control. Like in a race, like the weather.
Right.
I mean, it's Missouri.
Yeah,
It's St.
sure.
Louis. Like the weather is out of your hands completely.
Yeah.
So instead of getting, you know, frustrated by that, turning your focus a little more inward, be like, okay, the weather sucks. Well, I want to dress a little bit differently. I want to do this a little bit differently. Like, you know, if I'm running on a trail or I'm running in a cross-country course, I know the middle's going to be tore up. I know the outside's going to be more solid. Like, I'm going to go find, I'm going to do what I can do. It's the same for everyone else. Like, I'm not going to get overly obsessed over this stuff that I can't do anything about. And likewise, this, you know, and then doing the same thing for your teammates, being like, you hear some kid complain about, like, hey, dude, like, we can't control that. Like, we got to work on focusing on what we control. And like, and there's a lot of stuff, like, with positive psychology, it talks about, you know, not only just helping yourself, but helping others makes you in turn feel better about yourself.
Sure.
You know, and it's there's a whole lot of interesting stuff. And that should be a whole nother book for a whole other day. Whether you get into, like, you know, organized religion or like Buddhism or all these other things.
Sure.
Like, there's a lot of, like, if you get involved in anything like that, there's a lot of stuff there that is the same that, like, modern psychology tells you is healthy, and then it makes you think, like, oh, maybe these things have existed for hundreds of thousands, you know, for thousands and thousands of years, because, like, there's something right there.
Right.
You know, and that's a whole nother tangent for another day, but I do find a lot of that stuff very interesting.
Yeah, well, the book is Distance Training Simplified. You can find it on the website, distancetrainingsimplified.com, and purchase it at Amazon. And Sean O'Connor, Lafayette High School, tell me, what's your last pitch, just to people who might are looking at Amazon and looking at the website and think about hit and click and would, you know, buying it and picking something up from it.
Ooh, I'm not a good salesperson. I just hope, like, you would enjoy it, and you know that whether you're, like, an experienced coach or, like, brand new, you know, if nothing else, just seeing another perspective on how someone thinks or how someone organizes stuff. Well, whether it works well for you in your situation or not remains to be seen. But hopefully, just that, you know, just having that other perspective can build your own coaching repertoire and give you more tools to work with for other kids who maybe something like that might work better for. You never know.
Well, I think that's a good point. You know, having to change of perspective. You may be one of the most successful people in your field, but if you stop and look at through another vision, you may pick up something. And I'm being a former athlete of 4 Hall of Fame coaches. I think I've seen some of them admit and benefit that, okay, they looked at something a different way and a different training method, and you know, really benefited from that. And so people should definitely pick up the book. And lastly, what all the success at the Lafayette boys have, that's no secrets here. It's not, we're not shipping an EPO. The school's not at 10,000 feet when you pull in the driveway, and but
and it's shrinking.
Yeah,
We're getting smaller and smaller by the year.
Okay. Well, So yeah, if you want the secrets, you got to go find the book, guys. Appreciate the time, Coach, and
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, excited for the new book. Appreciate it.